Since the famous Chogam report in 2009, corruption by high-ranking government officials has been on an increase. The money, most of which has been diverted to personal use instead of meeting public demands, has created wide speculation and debate on government effort toward eradicating the disease. Uganda relies on funds from donor nations to account for 29% of the national budget. A significant portion of this money, about 4 trillion shillings, is lost to corruption according to the World Bank. Government publicist and also Media Center Executive Director Ofono Opondo says that government remains firm against the vice. He also praises internal checks and the separation of power between the executive, legislature, and the judiciary as establishments to curb corruption. His statements, however, are challenged by the opposition.
This government promulgated a new constitution, 1995 constitution, which brought in 2 fundamental reforms. One is to make the government more transparent, more accountable through democratic institutions, particularly parliament, elected councils at the lower level, and freedom of individuals, freedom of the media. So through these, most, if not all, government activities are examinable. So there's nothing that can be done by government and it is not seen.
Within those arms of government, the biggest problem we have now is that the other arms of government are subordinated to the executive. Parliament has been co-opted by the executive. The judiciary is co-opted and subordinated to the executive. So you have a preponderance of the executive. You have an overwhelming influence of the executive in government without checks. The checks have been knocked down.
Opondo says that government has also embraced the independence of its bodies, mainly the judiciary and parliament, that are under no state control, something that both the opposition and civil society dismiss. The opposition believes that the institutions are only pseudo, since appointments heavily rely on the executive.
Created a truly independent judiciary. The appointment of judicial officers from the Chief Justice up to the lowest judicial officer, court clerks, is done by an independent body, the Judicial Service Commission, which is answerable to nobody perhaps except Parliament.
Parliament, first of all, is elected with a huge influence of the executive. So Parliament, by the time it is sworn in, it is a parliament that has been rented by the president.
There is a mismatch, and I think what really hurts Ugandans is where government itself is coming up with reports, the same reports implicating the government officials, and guess what? At the end of the day, they're exonerated. The Auditor General is being investigated. I mean, what actually the other gimmick is I have Parliament investigating the Auditor General's report. I mean, it is so ironical.
In the face of ever-increasing corruption scandals lies a set of institutions run on taxpayers' money, yet most of them have intertwined roles. They include the Parliament of Uganda, the Inspector General of Government, which prosecutes and investigates public corruption, the Uganda Police, and the Directorate of Public Prosecution that supervises investigations and prosecution of graft cases. Activists say that more is needed to aid the fight and not merely institutions.
We have the laws in place. The institutions are in place, much as they may not really be strong. But when you look at the high levels of impunity whereby people think they can do whatever they can do and get away with it, and indeed we've seen a group of people that have done particular acts and they've got away with it. If you look at the current Anti-Corruption Act, we don't have provisions yet for forfeiture and attachment. A person can still, get away with it. They'll stay with the proceeds of corruption. You will arrest them, but when they come out, they're going to enjoy the proceeds. And then also, we have people that are not yet demanding. The locals they still feel apathy. They would rather sit back. They feel it's not their role, or they feel that it's the role of government or a role of few civil society organizations.
With all these institutions in place, without the political will to make corruption highly risky and dangerous for the people, without strong punitive measures to deal with the corrupt, you cannot handle corruption.
There is will, because nobody has will. You know, I'm a commander, James Kazini, for taking 100 bags of cement, was prosecuted and jailed. In fact, by the time he died, he was still battling that case. And so on and so on. So there are many cases where either investigations have been taken, prosecution is underway, or indeed convictions have been secured. In the case of the Global Fund, which was investigated by the IGG and later by a commission of inquiry by former Principal Judge Justice Ogola, the president was the complainant when somebody told him his two ministers, or three, Jim Muhwezi, Mike Mukura, and Alex Kamugisha, had got involved in corruption. It was the president who wrote to the ombudsman to investigate. Those who were investigated were prosecuted, and as you know, were removed from government. They have never returned.
Although prosecution has been seen to be done at certain instances, the opposition vehemently believes it is politically informed and cannot take the country anywhere. But government says such claims cannot turn him off the hook.
Selective government commitment has been there. If the government wants to deal with some opponents or suspected opponents within the system, they can become very active. And that is why Bukenya, who was being seen as getting critical of government, ended up in jail. But I would want to see them deal effectively with somebody like Saleh, who has had many cases leveled against him. Commissions of inquiry recommended his prosecution, and so on and so forth. Where somebody is considered as loyal to the powers that are, those people are not prosecuted.
Very few guilty people will admit that they are guilty. So, crying foul by Professor Gilbert Bukenya, crying foul by Jim Muhwezi, crying foul by Mukula and others is the normal way of any human being in such a situation. If it is political, how come they did not complain when the same president was appointing them? They didn't complain.
With many observers citing the lack of political will against corruption, activists blame police brutality as a nail in their activities regarding the creation of attention and awareness among citizens.
Of course, very sadly, fighting corruption today is becoming fighting government. When we started this Black Monday movement, we thought the police would join us. In fact, we decided that we should put the front picture of our second newspaper was "Our police deserves better." We actually thought that the police would join us to say, in order to have better services, better welfare, the army, everyone. Surprise, surprise. Police warns Black Monday activists. Police is now warning those who are fighting corruption.
In my view, both the law and the policy governing civil society organizations are good enough to make them truly independent. Perhaps what needs to be done is to strengthen their technical capacity to detect, investigate, and have platform for exposing corruption.
The president has also been accused for blocking the investigations of some of his dirty men. In the Chogam saga, for instance, the president is quoted to have attempted to fail the probe of Gilbert Bukenya, his then vice president.
I never came out to say there is no case against the former vice president. But in one of our party meetings, confidential meeting, I said, what I hear, there is no evidence against this man. The spies are the ones who put out my private conversation. Whatever I said in my secret meeting turned out to be correct. There was no case against Bukenya.
The president later influenced the prosecution of Bukenya after a political fallout in 2012. While Kenya was being sent to the coolers in Luzira, his counterpart, Mike Mukula, who had renounced political rivalry with the president, was set free. Government, however, maintained it was on the right course and no one would escape scot-free.
It is no longer possible for one senior government official to prevent exposition of a tendency, of a corrupt tendency. It's not possible. I don't think there's anybody who is beyond being exposed for corruption issues in Uganda. So I think that general environment is good for Uganda to maintain the momentum on the fight against corruption.
Every document in front of me here, when I open it, the amount of money that has gone missing are scary. You can't believe it. It is in trillions. It's in trillions. You just look at what went missing in public service. The pension of poor people. People who are dying before they have even got their sweat. They have got the fruits of their sweat.
Uganda has in the recent past been covered in a series of corruption scandals, with the most shocking dating back to the 2007 Chogam Summit. Both internal and foreign reports have continued portraying Uganda as highly corrupt, with minimal action against its officials. A recent internal survey by the Justice Law Commission revealed that police was most corrupt with 82%, followed by the judiciary at 79%. Closely following were the Uganda Revenue Authority at 77%, the District Service Commission at 74%, Umeme at 73%, and the Public Pension Scheme at 71%. According to Transparency International, a global anti-corruption body, Uganda continues to dominate corruption in the East African region. The 2013 corruption indices show that Uganda is most corrupt with 41%, followed by Tanzania at 39%. Kenya comes third with 30%, Burundi is fourth, 19%, and Rwanda is least corrupt with only 3%. The activists say that the thieves act with ruthlessness and malice. Just recently, money meant for the peace recovery and development plan for the northern Uganda was reportedly transferred to the crisis management and recovery account, from where it was siphoned by officials in the office of the Prime Minister.
The scandal in the office of the Prime Minister is simply, if you think who it is this money was intended for, the people of northern Uganda, with all that they have gone through, I'm just thinking, oh my goodness.
Graft slaves citizens to more poverty, disease and misery. The health sector is in a deplorable situation, not leaving out the education sector, where pupils, apart from going without meals at schools, they study under tree shades. Maternal health is highly subdued, with about 16 women dying every day, according to reports. With these and more problems biting hard, citizens share what they think of government's commitment on corruption.
Government is committed to kulwanyisa nguzi okusinziira ku bye tulabyeko, kubanga enguzi singa tubadde tuzirwanyisa ebintu ng'ebyabakazinda tebyandibaddewo.
Mu ndaba eyange gavumenti eri committed kulwanyisa abo abali enguzi, ensonga nti abamu abagiri ate bagamba nti bagirwanyisa.
Sirina kyendaba kyonna kyerwanyisa olw'ensonga ndaba ate sente zaffe banoonya bunoonya ngeri ya kuzibba, kuba kati wowulira nti esente ate bagaziteekamu zino zaffe ez'abalimi eza NADS bagaziteekamu ate abasirikale babeera bazikozesa. Olw'endabira ddala nga bongera bwongezi kufuna ngeri ki gye batukamulira ddala tusigalire ddala nga kwega tukaaba bukaabi.
I thought, like, if they get their corrupt officials, they get their property, as in they confiscate everything. That would be a bit hard, but the government is not doing anything about it, so I think it's doing totally nothing.
The government might not have taken a lot of efforts in fighting corruption. It is a little bit lax.
There are still many people whom we really see here in this country who get themselves in corrupt tendencies and actions with impunity. They seem to have backing. They seem to be the type of people who are treated with kid gloves.
But remember that when you establish the rule of law, you must play within the rule of law. What does the rule of law mean? For example, in our case, the principle of justice in Uganda is that all are innocent until proven otherwise by a competent court. Secondly, he who alleges has the burden of proof. So if a government alleges that Musoke is corrupt, it is up to the government, the prosecution, to prove beyond doubt, to the satisfaction of court, that indeed Musoke is corrupt.
Even with government's excuse of the justice system, activists continue pinning government for flouting prosecution procedures. Miriam Matembe cites cases where the state deliberately parades witnesses with conflicting interests, resulting into losing of all graft cases. This, she says, is a game by government to hoodwink the public into its failure to curb corruption tendencies.
If you are a person holding this office, didn't you look at the summary of evidence? Didn't you interview your witnesses to see what they are going to say? And then you say, or you see what they are going to say, and you look at the case and say, yeah, I have a case here. But you go, for instance, you are prosecuting Kutesa, and you bring his permanent secretary, who is supposed to be working together hand in hand with him to be a witness against Kutesa. Are you crazy?
With Uganda ranking high, not only in the region but also across Africa and the world altogether, the common people have suggestions for government.
Gavumenti abali b'enguzi yantaddewo amateeka amakakali bw'oli enguzi kino kikolebwa ate ne bagagoberera nga tebawuddeemu mbono wa ggwanga lino oba ono wa ggwanga lino.
Omuntu ng'oyo alidde ssente ng'ezo balina omusakishoninga aveeko actually ku bukulembeze ng'obwo ate bagezeeko kugoberera amateeka.
Omuntu abye kusente za gavumenti nze mu ndaba eyange yandibadde asibibwa ddala ng'asibibwa mayisa n'abalala ne balabira okwo.
I think whoever follows the line of corruption or even smells it deserves death. I don't see any difference between that kind of person and the one who commits murder.
If compromise is not practiced anywhere, the only way to do is just to dismiss them off.
Former FDC President, retired Colonel Kizza Besigye, says that corruption continues to thrive in the country because of the absence of ethical leadership and financial discipline in a regime he cannot serve under.
I would like to believe that my moral, ethical standards are different, and that is why I have been personally enraged by what is going on, and therefore to that extent I personally would censure even people who would be close to me from what they are doing in terms of their ethical standards, and I would not definitely appoint anybody who is tainted into areas of responsibility for public resources.
The moment we go beyond that you send people to prison regardless of whether they are your relatives or not, but more importantly that they have been adjudged to have been corrupt, that they have caused the loss of financial nature which should be public resource, then we will be seen to be walking the talk.
I see solutions as changing the leadership and then focusing at rebuilding the moral fabric of Ugandans.